Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Today we are decoding Christmas Eve tweets. And when I saw President Trump tweet, "I'm all alone, poor me in the White House, waiting for the Democrats to come back and make a deal on desperately needed border security," Thomas, I said, we have to join in. We can't let our POTUS be alone on Christmas Eve. So this is why we're together to do our Trump tweet decode.
It is so beautiful. And I just want to say we're so honored to have the opportunity to decode these Trump tweets. And this one needs a little bit of decoding. What he's saying is, I'm shutting down the government. I don't need any of you. I'm here alone, and guess what? I'm doing a better job without you than with you here, because your political lying and nonsense is so disgusting that you're on the naughty list, and there ain't a single Democrat that's going to get a single present.
POTUS drops by to listen to the audio. Y'all make sure to leave some nice comments and wish him a very Merry Christmas.
Now, I just want to point out the other hidden in between the line interpretations of this particular tweet. First off, what he's saying is, and this is unbelievable because he has now insinuated with his tweets that he's going to build the wall with the money from the shutdown. In other words, sorry, all you who think you're going on a furlough and going to get paid later, he just said he's taking your money to build the wall. Now, that is a threat. It is the biggest threat any president has ever made in U.S. history, to basically say, look, folks, I'm going to have a secure border no matter what. I don't care how I have to do it. You can cut the pie any way you want. But here's what really happens. Build the wall saves $100 billion a year in new immigrants, illegal immigrants crossing. That doesn't count criminality, human trafficking, drug, so on and so forth. No. That's just the people pouring across the border. In other words, spend $5 billion now, and in the first year you save $95 billion. Now, that's one element. How about the rest of it?
But this isn't an issue about money. This is an issue of the globalists who want to take over America and destroy us with these porous borders.
That's exactly what it is. It's an invasion. Clearly an invasion. We'll get to that when we talk about McGurk and the insanity of General Mad Dog Mattis, who basically we'll get into in a minute. They are ISIS. So why should Trump be concerned at all about Mad Dog Mattis leaving? He paid $1 billion a year to ISIS. McGurk, the guy who was basically the ISIS...
well, he's a special presidential envoy for a global coalition to counter ISIL.
When, in fact, he was the leader. He was the American representative leader of ISIS. That's the reason that he paid $150 billion to Iran so that Iran could support Hamas and Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guard, which then supported ISIS and ISIL. Hello. Let's look at the fact that it is so great that Mad Dog Mattis is gone. I'll talk about that in a minute. And that this special envoy, that special envoy was an enemy of the United States of America. He was the leader of ISIS. And remember, ISIS was founded by Barack Obama, Barry Soetoro. Let's not forget that. And that's the reason he always wanted to say, no. It's not ISIS, it's ISIL, instead of adding the entire Levant. In other words, Obama wasn't going to stop at Syria and Iraq. No, he wanted the entire Levant to be turned over to who? To the Shiites. And now what's happening? The civil war that's been going on there, which is what it is, and that civil war was aided by Mad Dog Mattis and the other three factions of Pentagon Islamic fascists who were basically mercenaries active in the civil war in Syria. This is a battle between the Shiites and the Sunnis, okay? The Revolutionary Guard, those are Shiites. Who is coming to take care of Syria now? Saudi Arabia.
Well, you're getting way ahead of our tweets.
I know, but I'm just pointing out that that's what he's talking about here. He says, I will sit here and I will make money and do a better job than if all of you were here. And during the shutdown, I'm just going to collect the money up and I'm going to do what I always said. Now, don't forget that we have pointed out that over 500 miles of the border wall have already been reinforced. That's 1/4 of it. It's done. And not a penny was taken from anything from the Congress. It was taken from the states and from national security and the untold amounts of money that he has because of his omnibus budget went for 2 years for the NDAA. So all he has to do is say this is a national security issue, which he has, and he created an executive order to that effect. And now he can build that wall any way he wants. And he could basically build it on credit and pay it back the next year from the literally $95 billion that would come from the new people coming across next year. The 22 million illegal aliens that are already here cost us trillions of dollars. $27 billion in just food stamps have been stopped by Trump saying, no, illegal aliens, we're not going to give you food stamps. So simply the food stamps alone in 1 year could build the wall 5 times over. So Trump, we know you're not alone. You have one of the most beautiful people in the world with you there, your wife and your beautiful family, and we're with you there. And as Betsy says, if you get lonely, you give us a call. We'll come and sit around the fireplace with you as we watch you collect the money to build the wall from the shutdown.
Okay, so the first tweet I want to start with is the last one on December 23rd. Again, folks, if you want to follow along with the tweets, just open up the link in the production notes, and I've got everything there. President Erdogan of Turkey has very strongly informed me that he will eradicate whatever is left of ISIS in Syria, and he is a man who can do it. Plus, Turkey is right next door. Our troops are coming home.
Okay. Erdogan is one of the worst Islamic fascist terrorists on the face of the earth. He wants to bring us into a war through NATO. He wants and was the source of offering Assad, President Assad, a place for the refugees to go when Assad bombed his own people to begin with so that he could get UN money for the refugees that left Syria and went to Turkey. Remember, this was a planned deal between Barack Obama, the president of Syria and the president of Turkey, okay, along with George Soros. And that is the reason that at the same time, the Arab Spring was going on and they were bombing 7 countries to create all these refugees going to Turkey because Turkey makes a fortune off of those refugees being there. Now, mind you, Turkey has already disappeared millions of those refugees, still collecting for them. But when they're counted, they come up between 1.5 and 2.5 million missing refugees. They did not go back home. These are dead people who have now been probably sold into Chinese slave trade or human organ harvesting. Mm-hmm. And yes, that's exactly what's happening. We see the biggest Chinese ships for troop carriers that they have come twice to Syria, empty and left full. Who was on that boat? Those were the refugees that Erdogan sold. Now, Erdogan is as criminal as he can possibly be. But we told you a long time ago, we told you over a year ago, we were the first one to bust this story wide open and tell you that Fethullah Gulen, who runs one of the largest charter school movements in America, ripping off America for billions of dollars to literally run Islamic fascist schools. I speak from direct experience.
Well, I do too. I've been into those schools, and they've got the boys and girls separated, and the girls are all clothed up in their burqas and their hijabs. I mean, it's a crazy thing. These are schools in America.
His group has met his demands that the teachers who they hire from foreign countries who are not qualified, who speak Arabic, and basically are teaching Islamic fascism, have to donate sometimes as much as 65% of their salary back to that charter school management company that is run by Fethullah Gulen. Now, who is Fethullah Gulen? He was Erdogan's number one man. He was his propaganda minister, basically. But because he became such a spiritual figure in Turkey, he started opening these international schools all over the world, and Erdogan hated that. So then Erdogan, when Gulen moved to America and has been protected by Barack Obama and now is not protected by Trump. Trump already said he's extraditing him. That's what this is all about. The reason that Erdogan is going to go in and kill ISIS in Syria, and he'll also kill the Kurds, by the way, he'll kill all the Kurds, because remember, Turkey has been part of pogrom after pogrom where they deny that they've killed tens of millions of people at a time. That's standard operating procedure for Turkey. Why should we be fighting a war for Turkey when they get money for the refugees? They started the war. They're in direct collusion with Soros, with Barack Obama's globalists, as well as they were working directly against Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, and working for who? Iran.
But let's go back to this tweet, because the tweet says that Erdogan is going to eradicate whatever is left of ISIS in Syria.
Let's go back to the very beginning when Trump took power. In the first 2 to 3 weeks, ISIS was wiped out. Why? Because they allowed people like Mad Dog Mattis complete open bombing. And for the first time, literally, in the first few weeks, the only time ISIS centers were ever bombed were in those first few weeks, and ISIS was practically eradicated in the first month of Trump's presidency. Now, then he allowed Mad Dog Mattis to go after other places. And what happened? Al-Qaeda in Yemen wiped out. Al-Qaeda in Somalia. All throughout Africa, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, all ISIS, ISIL, al-Nusra, bombed, done. We actually declared that we defeated ISIS well over a year ago. But here's Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, saying, oh, I don't believe, I think that we should be supporting our allies. Your allies, Mad Dog Mattis, are ISIS, Bashir of Syria, Erdogan of Turkey, China, Russia. Those are your allies. Those are the people you worked for. And if you admit the fact that when you leave this job now, which you're making a big political stink about, you're going to go right out to a corporate intelligence agency and work for a globalist group, and you will simply be a very obvious enemy of America. So, Trump has given Gulen, he's going to give Gulen to Erdogan. And when that happens, Erdogan hates Gulen more than anything on the face of the earth. He actually accused him of being the person behind the revolution that tried to topple him from outside of the country, which he probably did not do. But that doesn't matter. Gulen is as evil as anyone could possibly be. His charter school movement should have been closed down from the first moment. It is completely against everything that the charter school movement stands for. It's a huge ripoff, and that is why not only Saudi Arabia is coming in to kill ISIS in Syria and to end the war there, but Turkey is saying that they will. Because why? Turkey supported ISIS. Turkey supported all 5 of the different groups. So what are we talking about here? Just what Trump said from the beginning. Get out of these wars that don't belong to us. Let them settle themselves. These are civil wars between Sunnis and Shiites. We can't stop that. Let them fight each other. And now it's going to be Saudi Arabia coming in to fighting Iran. This is what the war is. Turkey's just doing it to make money. And Erdogan should be deposed. And I wish that someone like Gulen could in fact topple Erdogan, because he's one of the most dangerous things to NATO. One of the most dangerous things on the face of the earth.
NATO is a dangerous thing in and of itself. All it is a what do they call it? A stay-behind army,
right,
that works for the globalists to destroy these nation borders. We got to get rid of NATO. Are we ever going to see our funding significantly drop with NATO?
Oh, yes, we're seeing it right now because they're not paying their bill. Remember when they went over there the first time, Trump and his team, they all said, oh, no, we know we owe you this many hundreds of billions of dollars, and here's our first payments. Matter of fact, they paid him hundreds of billions the day he arrived. And then they said,
enough to pay for a wall to be built?
Oh, Trump has already saved us. We have calculated at least $15 trillion. $5 billion for the wall is a spit in the bucket that could be, again, as we pointed out, $95 billion could be recouped the next year just simply by stopping those people coming into our country. So the $5 billion, that's not what it's about. It's about the 22 million illegal aliens who have Social Security cards, who pay taxes and act as if they're citizens. They are illegal aliens, criminal aliens acting as if they're citizens, and this is who the Democrats want to vote for them.
But it's going to be another story on top of this when these government workers, these non-essential workers, these senior executive service operatives don't get paid, through January. They get a paycheck now right after the holidays, but going forward, as long as the government shut down, this furlough is going on, they're not getting a paycheck. Now, some people will say, well, they're going to get paid afterwards. And I say, hey, people, raise a stink about that. Contact the White House and say, no, they shouldn't be paid. But here's the thing, is that they're going to miss out on income flow, because you're talking about families that live in a high income area, very expensive area out in Virginia. And when that income flow stops, they're going to be in a panic, and they're going to go to Pelosi and Schumer, and they're going to beg those two to make a deal with Trump. And let them beg, because Trump could sit back and go, $5 billion isn't enough. I think I need $8 billion. But it doesn't matter, because the base of these Democrats are going to be hurting, and they're going to be demanding themselves that these Democrats do a deal with Trump. And once that deal is made, that's it. We own them, because we can continue to come back and rattle the cages of their bureaucratic operatives by not paying them.
We cannot secure our republic without securing our elections. And right now, we know from just the 17 states that reported, 3.5 to 5.5 million illegal aliens voted in the 2016 election. We do not have fair and honest and true elections in this country.
And where's Mike Pence's report on election rigging? Isn't that due now?
It's
and that Kirsten Nielsen? Where is it? Because I tell you, Thomas, it better be better than the report that we gave the president.
The problem is that Pence kind of got knocked off his seat because of Kelly and Kirsten Nielsen. They were supposed to be...
Well, then get back on your damn seat and give us a report on the election rigging. And I want to see this Optex software revealed. I want to see the election boxes revealed. Not just the election rigging of this the ballot harvesting, but the whole shebang. If Pence doesn't reveal this, he simply isn't doing his job, and he is not supporting the America First movement.
Pence is such a disappointment. He's very much like a Jeff Sessions. And unfortunately, he actually thinks he's doing a good job by doing nothing. So he got taken out of that investigation, and it was turned over to Homeland Security, and they have not made a report. And your issues are absolutely
But I thought Trump
true.
said that all of his cabinet members needed to come back with a report on this.
That is what he is waiting on. But now let's remember, he's also waiting on Michael Horowitz's expedited...
Michael Horowitz,
yeah.
He's just a SES operative, and so is Huber. They are there to use lawfare to keep anything from moving forward. They're like Mueller. That's what Mueller does.
And we pointed that out from the beginning, and we hate to have to say that some of our compatriots out there in the
let's name
world.
It's Sundance at Conservative Treehouse that we really like all the things that are posted there. But early on, he said that Horowitz was a white hat. Now I read some articles where he's trying to walk that back.
Completely walking it back. We said from the beginning, Huber was a fake, Launch was a fake, Horowitz would do nothing, Horowitz indicted no one, and Horowitz is there simply to cover it up, and because of Sally Yates's report saying that the Inspector General cannot look at an active special counsel investigation, everything is deferred to Herr Mueller. Everything. It doesn't matter. Anything, the border wall, anything that might have a slightest reference to the largest scope fake investigation which hunt ever created in America comes under the purview of Mueller giving permission or not. Same thing with 911. No one got to investigate it because he was there as the doorkeeper. He was there as the person covering the trail. He was there as the complicit criminal, as he is right now with what he's covering up with what happened with Hillary and her stupid emails, which were in fact simply part of the plan. She's a Russian Chinese communist who works for every foreign nation, but she does not work for America.
Where is she now? The last thing I saw was her dancing with John Kerry at some Indian wedding, and they were kind of getting lost in the crowd, and that's it. She just disappeared. Where is she now?
Well, she was in Shanghai, and then when we busted her on that one, now Broadcom and their fake representative, her basic stooge who is the front man for that, we busted him. We're going to bust them on the 5G, so she got chased out of Shanghai, and now she went to India. Why? Because that's where the big deals are going down. for the foreign workers who are stealing our jobs and outsourcing them. That's why John Kerry's there, getting a piece of the pie for Christopher Hines' son. That's why Hillary's there, getting a piece of the pie for the Clinton Foundation. Wherever the money is flowing, them and Biden and a few others are there putting in their tax stations so that they can get their piece of the pie up front from the beginning, because they know that they control the crypto keys. Hillary does, of course. Hillary controlled the emolument funds from 125 nations. They're still waiting to get paid off. Hillary needs to become president. She made all these promises, and so she's out there continuing these promises, telling everyone she's going to be the president of the United States of America. Absolutely the biggest piece of garbage ever. It's kind of like the nonsense they perpetrate about Trump.
Virtually every Democrat we are dealing with today strongly supported a border wall or fence. It was only when I made it an important part of my campaign, because people and drugs were pouring into our country unchecked, that they turned against it. Desperately needed. And I'm going to move into the next one. To those few senators who think I don't like or appreciate being allied with other countries, they are wrong. I do. What I don't like, however, is when many of these same countries take advantage of their friendship with the United States, both in military, protection, and trade.
First off, he's making a reference to Mad Dog Mattis for the first time in history that a position of such high authority militaristically openly states that they're in defiance against their boss. Okay. First off, if you're in defiance against your boss and you're in the military, you should be court-martialed. You take your orders from the president. You do not give the president order. I mean, what don't you understand about that? But because the military-industrial complex has its fingers so deeply into our Congress and our Senate and in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and in the way that all the money flows, let's not forget, if you're a major general, a major player on the world scene, you have an offshore account. Remember General Flynn? Think of anyone. Think of Wesley Clark. Think of anyone. Think of anyone that was a major general who isn't then a globalist player, who then worked for the Carlyle Group, or who would work, for these groups that were so corrupt that it is so obvious, like working for Lockheed Martin once you leave the government as a general. Please, really? Lockheed Martin is owned by the Queen. So Mathis. Really? Mathis's allies are ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda, Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, the European Union, and the worst of all, the Five Eyes. That would be the United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. Those are our enemies. Those are not our allies, Mr. Mad Dog. And I'm so glad that you're leaving, because you were given the opportunity to kill ISIS, and in a few months you did. And then what did you do? Figured out new ways to fund them. And now what do you want to say? You want to say the president doesn't appreciate our allies? Name an ally. Please, name an ally. Name an ally of the United States of America besides Poland, who just, did an economic deal with us. There are economic deals. There are economic allies. Those are unilateral deals between the United States of America president and other countries.
But it's also propaganda, because if people think that Britain is our ally, then we will not look at Britain, the Privy Council, and their attempted coup d'etat, or their attempted overthrow of America, and perhaps even the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. So if you keep calling people allies, you don't look to see that they truly are enemies.
Mad Dog Mattis might as well go on TV now with James Clapper and John Brennan and James Comey, because he is equally as guilty as they are. He was completely complicit in all of those evil acts of Obama. He was completely complicit in basically the military-industrial complex control, corporate warlord, banker, broker control of America. And what he's complaining about here is, wait a second, we have a president who's telling the truth. The top military leaders in the National Security Council, we tell the president what to think. We tell him what to do. And we send one individual who is in charge of weapons of mass destruction with whatever lies we want to tell that president to keep the president in complete dark, because the 17 intelligence agencies are all corrupt because the people at the top, as you pointed out, senior executive service members, are as corrupt as anybody can possibly be. So what is really going on here? This is Mad Dog Mattis saying, hey, you're standing up against the way we've been doing things since 1913, and we don't like it. When Woodrow Wilson gave over the country to the bankers and to the military and to the robber barons and to the U.S. Fed and so on and so forth, and Harry Dexter White, when that happened, that was fait accompli. That was done. No more. We don't get a president who gets to stand in the way of the bureaucratic system that we've created. And Mad Dog Mattis is just like a Mueller, just like a McCabe, just like a Comey, just like Boente, just like Sally Yates, Loretta Lynch, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton.
They're globalists. That's it. They're globalists.
And they all come out and they show who they are over and over again.
They want the destruction of America for their own greedy purposes.
They are war actors.
Let's move on.
Non-Americans.
We are substantially subsidizing the militaries of many very rich countries all over the world, while at the same time, these countries take total advantage of the U.S. and our taxpayers on trade. General Mattis did not see this as a problem. I do, and it is being fixed. Now, Thomas, before you jump into here, you realize with the savings, the money that Trump is saving, there could be a point where our taxes, our personal income taxes, are not only reduced significantly, but maybe just wiped out altogether. Why do we need to be paying taxes when we can save so much money? Because our allies are no longer reaching into our pockets, stealing our money to run their military operations.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's what Trump is saying in some of these other tweets. Y'all don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't work the way you think it works. And the U.S. Fed does not do what it is supposed to be doing. And that's why he's in a war against the U.S. Fed.
Well, we're going to talk about the Fed in a minute.
So at this point, Mad Dog Mattis is the leader of the military-industrial complex. He stepped up to take the place of James Clapper and John Brennan. And basically, he needs to be court-martialed. Because not only did he stand against the president's orders, he did not do what the president said. He did not eradicate ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda. As a matter of fact, it's growing. And guess where it's growing, folks? It's growing in Central America, and it's coming up through Mexico. And Mad Dog Mattis didn't do a thing about the fact that Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, ISIL, every one of our enemies is in that caravan. If he really was who he says he is, and these were our allies, and Mexico was our ally, El Salvador our ally, any of those countries, if they were our allies, this would not be happening because it would be considered a military matter. And when Trump made it a military matter, you had Mad Dog Mattis for the first time stopping the rogue CIA bringing their drugs, their human trafficking, their organ trafficking, their illegal aliens into this country. That is a military attack upon this country, and Mad Dog Mattis might as well have been coordinating it himself.
The next tweet reads, for all of the sympathizers out there of Brett McGurk's, remember, he was the Obama appointee who was responsible for loading up airplanes with $1.8 billion in cash, sending it to Iran as part of the horrific Iran nuclear deal, now terminated, approved by little Bob Corker.
Mind you, the $1.8 billion is the tip of the iceberg. It was $150 billion that John Kerry made sure to give to Iran. Where did that money go? It went into all those missiles that were the missile embankments placed in Syria, that literally hundreds of missiles have now been launched, paid for by John Kerry, paid for by Brett McGurk, who was supposed to be fighting ISIS, but in fact was funding ISIS. And, of course, who provided that money? That was Obama. He invented the fact that we owed them after $400 million that we kept of their money during the Iran Contra scandal, as well as the hostages held in Tehran. We held $400 million in abeyance. So he paid them $1.8 billion because he paid interest on it. This is what Barry Soetoro did for our country. And then behind the scenes, and by the way, paid it in the very currencies they wanted so they could destabilize the petrodollar, right? That's what that was about. That was basically going on the side of Iran against Saudi Arabia, because Obama couldn't stand the fact that the Bushes literally lived in Saudi Arabia. And when Trump is saying these rich countries, he's talking about Saudi Arabia. We've been fighting their wars since time immemorial. And that time is over. And so what has happened? They've stepped up. They're now going to fight the battle in Syria. And who are they going to fight? They are going to fight the Iranians, Hezbollah, Hamas. They're going to fight the John Kerry, Obama, Hillary Clinton $150 billion donation to basically radical Islamic fascism coming out of Iran, the number one source of basically terrorism, Islamic terrorism on the face of the earth. And they have basically infinite money. They gave missiles to Yemen to attack Saudi Arabia. They gave missiles to Somalia. They gave Nigeria, all over the place. This was John Kerry, who is still to this very day, as you just pointed out there with Hillary Clinton, doing the same thing right now, selling out America as an arms dealer. These are arms dealers. Adnan Khashoggi was the largest arms dealer probably in human history, and he was George H.W. Bush's best friend. He created Barrick Gold with him. And his nephew was the truth minister, the guy who just got chopped up in pieces, who well deserved to be chopped up into pieces because he was certainly part of 9/11. And so was Adnan Khashoggi. And so was Daddy Bush. Baby Bush was too stupid to know what was going on, but certainly Dick Cheney, one of the Vulcans, who still continues right now. Look at Genie Oil in Golan Heights. That's one of the major reasons we're having the battle in Syria, and that's the reason we're giving up the battle in Syria, because we're not going to fight the battle for Dick Cheney and for Rupert Murdoch and for the Rothschilds and the other people involved in Genie Oil. That's what's going on. That's why Trump is backing out. He is not going to give U.S. aid anymore to these foreign agents who act as if they're Americans or crown agents of the Brits, and basically steal the money, never give it back, and literally build a wall around Golan Heights to protect the oil rigs of corporations that have nothing to do with America. They're the rip-off robber barons of the world, and we pay for it. So that's what Trump is actually doing here. And this Brett McGurk, he didn't know him because he was basically the leader of ISIS in America.
Okay, now that you got all worked up, let's move to your favorite topic, the Fed. The only problem our economy has is the Fed. Do you hear that? The only problem our economy has is the Fed. They don't have a feel for the market. They don't understand necessary trade wars or strong dollars or even Democrat shutdowns over borders. The Fed is like a powerful golfer who can't score because he has no touch. He can't putt. I mean, let's just call it out. The Fed is nothing but a central bankster operation to keep the banks rich and the people poor.
Yes, and if we go into what's happening right now, we predicted, over 2 years ago that this would happen and what would be the ultimate outcome of it. And we're going to tell you again now, just so we can pat ourselves on the back. We told you that there was a battle going on between the U.S. Federal Reserve, which is not U.S., it is not federal, and it is not a reserve. It is a private corporation. We have no control over the U.S. Fed. They must report once a year to the House, but basically there's no oversight whatsoever, and they're very proud to tell you that there's no oversight. In 1913, it was the Aldrich Act, and Aldrich had married one of the daughters of Rockefeller, and so he was representing Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan when they created in 1913 the U.S. Federal Reserve. Paul Warburg, of course, wrote the bill for it. But the point is that from that point on, we have not controlled our economy. All that happens is the following, and you need to understand this, because this is why Trump is going to have to close the U.S. Fed. And by the way, it's an act of Congress. It has to keep being approved.
It needs just one signature, and poof, they're gone.
Done. One bill.
But it's going to be challenging because the globalists line the pockets of all these politicians.
The number one job of the Fed is to estimate what the household income of all Americans will be into the future, and then to appropriate the taxes that will be collected from them as the debt to the U.S. Federal Reserve. Now, that's complicated, but I want you to understand this. They estimate there's $100 trillion worth of U.S. household value which can be taxed. Now, mind you, we owe $21 trillion in taxes to the U.S. Federal Reserve, which we don't owe one penny for, by the way. And why do we owe that? Because of war debt. Because of 1913, the war debt from World War I and II got rolled into the U.S. Fed. Right now, all taxes in the United States of America collected do not pay the tax debt we owe the U.S. Fed for supposedly handling our monetary policy. Now, they've never done anything for us. The U.S. Fed has never done anything for America. Let me give you an example. In 2015, they basically handled $100 billion. They gave America $95 billion and kept $5 billion for their expenses. Now, mind you, they have what? Right now they got 5 members. So 5 members get paid literally. It was just a few years ago, they put in a bill, and they don't tell you this. They put in a bill after all of that. They say they handle this money for us, and then they give it all back to Americans, but they're a corporation, so they get paid, and their bosses, the 7 people who run it on that commission, which there's only 5 right now, 4 of whom are Republicans and Jerome Powell.
But it doesn't matter if they're Republicans or Democrats, because either party can be the globalist party. And so that's who the feds are, and they're there to rip off Americans.
Completely. They are corporate warlord bankers, period. They are the bankers for bankers so that they
There's nothing good about the Fed. We
Nothing.
need to close it down. They're a private corporation. They suck at their job. They haven't done what they said they could do. And we need to cut off our contract with the Fed. And we need to roll everything over to the U.S. Treasury.
Now, mind you, when Obama was in power, they only raised the rates because that's the number one tool they have, is to raise the rates that banks loan money to other banks, commercial and central banks.
Smoke and mirrors.
It's all smoke and mirrors.
Smoke and mirrors to
It's
fool the regular folks so that they can make money and you have less.
This is so bankers don't have to follow any rules. Because not even the U.S. Federal Treasury supposedly has control over the Fed. Now, that is a big fat lie. And I'm going to explain this to you, and probably you won't have heard this explanation before, but let me put it in as simple as terms as I can. And it's not simple. First off, the New York Fed basically controls our economy because they can make loans for less than the rates. They can make loans for greater than the rates to foreign countries. They can move money around from one central bank to the next, shuffling assets that then support commercial banks. Since 1930, they didn't have this power to begin with, but since 1930 or so, they have basically subsumed almost all of the powers of the U.S. Treasury. But there's been a war going on ever since then, and in the 70s and 80s, it got really pitched. And for instance, as I said 4 years ago, they put in their $50 billion bill to pay 5 of them. $50 billion to pay 5 members. And the U.S. Congress said, no, we're going to give you $4.5 billion. And so they went on a war with us. We've been in a war with them ever since. And that's when the rates started to tick up. Now, there's been 8 rate hikes since 7 since Trump came to power. That is an attack upon the U.S. currency. It's an attack upon what would be considered the open markets. It's an attack because they're using their assets. They have $1.5 trillion in mortgage-backed securities. They bought them as bad debt to then turn around and sell them back onto the market to make an advantage of it. And now, for the first time in history, the U.S. Fed told the central banks to buy stock on the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, they have nothing to invest their money in. And so when you see this inflated stock market, it's largely because the banksters and these technology companies keep buying into it.
They keep buying their own stock, and now they're dumping it. And so they've been told to clear their balance sheets of all their stock on the New York Stock Exchange. First off, it should have been illegal. Banks should not be brokers. Banks, central banks, which have infinite money, they can print infinite money.
And buy
Why would they
anything
be
they want?
allowed to get involved in any kind of exchange?
But look what they've done to the housing industry. I mean, we just did a report a few weeks ago about the people that are left homeless because of this whole mortgage fraud system. And it's central to what happened in 2008 with the collapse of the housing market. So there is just no good from the Fed. Folks, we need to close the Fed. We need to put a lot of pressure on President Trump and the Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin to close the Fed. There's no good for America. And if it's no good for America, it's no good for anybody in the world. We've got to get a handle of these central banks that are running our world into nothing but tyranny, war. It's just killing, killing, killing.
In over 100 years, the U.S. Fed has never, ever been audited. Matter of fact, there's a law that says we can't audit the Fed's international exchanges, currency exchanges, currency support. And since the 70s and 80s, the broad perspective and control that the U.S. Fed says it has, first off, is a lie. Second off, it has not actually been approved. Third off, there's been a battle since the early 30s, since the time that the Exchange Stabilization Fund was created, when we changed the rate of what we paid out for a gold coin. And, of course, the U.S. Treasury has the power to determine that. They changed it from $20 to $35. They took billions of dollars, put it in the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and worked with Harry Dexter White, who was a Russian communist, who worked with the United Nations to create the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and special drawing rights. So when you work with the Fed, you're working not only with all the money in all the banks, all the money in the International Monetary Fund, the special drawing rights, and the World Bank, but you're also working with the ability for the Fed to adjust rates, which they shouldn't have any control of that because they are corporate interests making money off of that. And thirdly, the most powerful thing they have is to project the income from taxes from all Americans and then to place those taxes on us and make sure that that tax burden can never be paid. We always keep increasing our debt ceiling. Why?
And they have their henchmen come out and grab the money. This is the IRS. And the great news is the IRS is closed down during this furlough period. And let's keep the government closed. Let's keep the IRS closed permanently, because all they do is come out here and seize our money to pay the Fed and this debt that the Fed, not the United States, has created.
And I want to point something out. They're going to tell you that the U.S. Fed has a group called the Federal Open Market Committee. First off, it's not federal. Second off, it's not an open market. And third off, it's not a committee. What it is, it's a group of 7 people who then take 12 other members rotating through. 5 of them get to vote from the central banks. And they sit on the Federal Open Market Committee and they determine federal policy, federal monetary policy. Well, this is a big fat lie. They just the other day, because Mad Dog Mattis has resigned, it shook up the market and investors are shy to invest. Those are all lies. Not one word of that is ever the truth. So, the Federal Open Market Committee is anything but that. And if they were doing their job, they would tell you what I'm going to tell you right now. There is no stable market in the world right now, except America. We are the most stable. And right now, the plunge protection team has been called together by Mnuchin, the head of the U.S. Treasury, and we're going to tell you about that in a minute. But the war has been going on between the U.S. Fed and their group called the Federal Open Market Committee against a group that is directly run by the president, and no one has any control over these groups except the United States president. And he can do what he wants. And Reagan demonstrated this. They basically can create, say, Clinton bonds. They can invent paper Treasury bonds and sell them to the U.S. Treasury. Well, that's the major job of the U.S. Fed, supposedly, is to sell paper notes, bonds, Treasury bonds, and basically bet against the fact that our currency will continue to inflate so that then when the Fed pays back on those bonds and those paper notes, you actually make a profit. Well, that's all complete nonsense. Every market in the world is collapsing, and some of the markets are collapsing 29, 35%, on and on and on. Even the strongest markets are collapsing, and they're in double-digit collapse. So, Betsy, as we've talked about so much before, it's a complicated issue, but it's also simple to solve. So, we're drawing this contrast between the U.S. Fed and their control group and the U.S. Treasury and their control group. The U.S. Fed has no control, zero control. We have nothing more than more or less, it's a bill, but it's more or less a gentleman's agreement with the Fed. That's all we have. We don't owe that debt. So what we're going to talk about in the next section is this contrast between the two and the way that never in U.S. history, except going back to the debates with Madison and Jefferson and whether we should even have a central bank, never in U.S. history have we been in a position where a president was saying, I'm going to take back control from the warlord bankers. And so what we're seeing right now is beautiful. It is not bad. Folks, do not worry about the New York Stock Exchange. It will come, it will go. It will go up, it will go down. And it is 100% controlled by the plunge protection team. This is historic. This is well known. Every time they meet, they plan how far it's going to plunge and what they're going to do to stop it. That's what they're planning right now. Trump already told us this is going to happen. So in the next section, we're going to go into much more detail between the dichotomous battle going on between the U.S. Fed and the U.S. Treasury.
Yes, and I will have another video where we'll continue the tweets of December 24th. Thank you.